See, we can never stay strong, stay strong, stay strong. Never, if never you, still if I am running, stay strong. We here, we in here. We salute, we salute. So high, so high, oh high. We come so far.
You are tuned into WEMS Radio, where we are bringing light back to the industry.
Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on WEMS Radio, bringing you conversations with various different people who have various opinions and perspectives. They come from all walks of life. And what we'll be doing here is we'll be looking at spirituality from a practical point of view. How does spirituality work in your everyday life? How can you use spiritual tools moment by moment? So I'm here to guide you through the process of finding joy and living your best life with grace and ease. So if you like what you hear today, I'd like for you to follow me on Instagram, Rev Granetta, on Facebook, Reverend Granetta Briggs Mason, and on YouTube, Reverend Granetta Briggs Mason. So tonight's guest is Baron Wright. Now, Baron is an entrepreneur. He's a creativity coach and a leadership facilitator. So Baron is very special to me. I met him at Momentum Education. And Momentum Education is an organization that specializes in professional development, personal and professional support through workshops. I love Momentum because for me, it's always about that next level. What can I do to get to the next level of living my best life? So I met Baron there as my coach. He has become a very dear friend to me. I love him, love him, love him, because he is always about leveling up. And that's what I like. I love the energy that he brings. So today, Baron and I will be talking about transformation and spirituality. We'll talk about using the creative arts as a tool. We'll talk about spiritual practices and also the special personal spiritual toolkit. So welcome, Baron Wright. Hey, hey.
Hey.
How are ya?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great. So welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. So first, Baron, would you give us some highlights of your spiritual journey?
Oh, we jump right in.
Where else will we go? Tell us about yourself. You know how you get that question. Give us something about yourself. So the highlights, right? And sprinkle spirituality in there, you know.
Okay. Well, before I begin, I just want to say it's great to see you here and having your own show, and honored to be one of the first couple of people here to be a part of your show, because I know the journey it took to get here, and I'm just so happy to be here with you. A little bit about me. My name is Baron Wright. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, currently living in Philadelphia. Used to live in New York City for a long time. I'm a trainer, facilitator, leadership facilitator, creative coach, brand coach. and artist as well. And so something about what was the question? My spiritual
journey. Well, as you talk about your life, right? I guess I did jump right in there and say, let's get to the spiritual, right?
right.
I think as you take us through highlights in your life, you may be able to highlight, what spiritual tool you use, if any, or if there was anything around spirituality, because spirituality can mean a lot of different things. It's not necessarily that you go to church or that you practice a particular type of spirituality. So I'm having different people on, that come from different religions, different spiritual backgrounds. So just in talking about that.
Got it. It's spirituality is such an interesting conversation to have. Like I don't particularly consider myself religious, but I do believe in a higher power, a universal oneness of all of us. And so that's sort of how I've chosen, or how I've learned to move into the world, that we're all part of the same thing, right? And so with that being said, my spirituality is around the possibility of who I am, and of who everyone else is. So it's a like a knowing or a belief that anybody can be whatever they want to be, and so can I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That, yeah, I believe in that too. Can you talk about? I know that you're a creative, right?
Yes.
And can you talk to us about some of the things that you do as a creative? And maybe people don't know what the word is also, because it's a new word that I've been hearing a lot about, and there's been a lot of emphasis around creatives. So could you talk about being a creative?
That's a great question. Yes. 'Cause I like to, so when people say creative, they usually think artist or someone in the art field. And I like to sort of broaden the conversation around what it is to be a creative. I believe it's someone who use creativity, or the aspects of creativity, to bring things forth in the world. So you can be a creative sitting at a desk doing computer programming, because you're creating a new system, a new process out of nothing, right? So for me as a creative, as far as like expression, how I used to express it, I've been not going through the list. So before I go through the list, I feel I judge myself about it sometimes, because there's a lot of things I've been interested in and have sort of worked through, and I don't want to seem like I'm like they say, you're a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It wasn't my intention to be a master at those things, but it was definitely my intention to be as good as I can be before I go into the list, because it's a list, right? So my first love was photography, and then poetry when I was in high school, modeling. Then it became sort of art directing, graphic design, performance poetry, spoken word poetry, then producing music, making music, singing, rapping, singing, rapping, acting, performing, acting, and acting. Then from acting, what else have I done? Putting programs together, facilitating, becoming a life coach, like those.
Because I was going to say how meeting you at Momentum as a leadership facilitator, how did you get from all those creatives, right, and doing all of those things to this point of, venturing into leadership facilitator?
Got you. So with momentum education, did you explain what that is? I can explain it.
I did.
You did? Okay,
I,
great. So with momentum education, I did the workshops in 2006. But then I would come back again and again and like staff or support the new people going through the programs and their journey. And I did that for a number of years. And then I took a break because I had there was an album I was doing that was out there to perform and sort of get out in the world, and other life things were happening. And then life got a little crazy. I went and got a therapist, and interesting enough, the therapist had also done work with momentum education. And she said, you know what you should do? You should go back and staff. And so I went back and staffed and did it a couple of times. And up until this point, being a leadership coordinator wasn't in my mind at all. It just wasn't. I did want to support the company, but it was like in a totally different way. I was an artist. I had artists, and I had my 9-to-5, my New York City struggle job, I call it.
Right.
I wasn't struggling, but it's like that job you take to pay all the bills, and then you do your hustle on the side. You know what I'm saying? So I had that job, and then it was actually a conversation with the director at that time, the director of Momentum Education. I said I was interested in doing, like I said, in supporting a different way, and he was like, "Well, what do you thoughts about being a leadership coordinator?" And I sat back in my chair, and I said, "I got to think about that." So I went home, talked to some good friends, and I think in a day or two said, "Yes, let's do it." And then I started training up to be a leadership trainer. But I think in hindsight, that all of that did happen, but I've always been interested in what it is. As an artist, I believe your job is to inspire people. And being a leadership coordinator wasn't that different. And I was already comfortable with speaking in front of people. So it was just learning the curriculum and, and trusting.
Trusting, right. So today you are a leadership coordinator. Are you still pursuing your creative endeavors? Were you able to be a part of Momentum and still continue to create? And I know you're an entrepreneur, so you probably have several other projects, right? Could you talk about some of your current projects? I mean, when I think about it, it's like, oh, I did 20,000 things. I'm currently working on 8, right?
Right. So there are some, over the years, there have been things I've worked on, because I still have an interest in expressing myself in different ways. And so the leadership, being a life coach or a transformational facilitator is one way. I still love music. So every now and again, I pull out my 1s and 2s and DJ. I didn't mention DJ before, I also DJ. Right. Every time I pull out my 1s and 2s and want to DJ or play with music every now and again. The stuff that I really work on now, it's really programs to support other people and expressing themselves. So, and it's through my company called Barron Arts. And through that, it's a transformational coaching, branding, and creative sort of company that I wanted to mesh and meld all the parts of me in support of other people living their best lives.
Okay, so we got the same thing. We want to live our best lives.
And all the time.
I took your branding course, and
yes,
here I am, branding, right?
You are my proof. Yes.
That branding works, right? So, when I first mentioned spirituality, you're like, whoa, spirituality, right? But when you are doing your transformational trainings, is there any spirituality, or what would be how spirituality is expressed in this transformational type training that you do?
Great question. I think spirit is always there, because I think that's who we're communicating with, right? The body is the shell, the vessel, but me and you are communicating spirit to spirit. So it's always, the spirit is always present. How I weave it into my trainings is that I fundamentally believe that we all have choice, and we all have, and through choice, we can create our lives. And so with that being said, we get to create our lives, we get to sort of work inside of our choices in the spirit. Because I think I always say no one is living my life better than I'm living it. Right? Because they can't.
Right.
And so there is no failure in life. You're just living from moment to moment to moment to moment. And spirit is just learning more and more about what it is to be spirit.
I like that, because when we think about spirit to spirit as human beings, we're connecting, and it reminds me of it's all energy.
Yes.
And when we are one. So when we come together, if we're heart to heart, how do we connect heart to heart, spirit to spirit in that one energy field? And so when we can connect in that field, then we're really, really communicating and communicating with each other on a real level, right? And I like that thing about choice, because we get to choose all the time. It's one of those things. It's like, and sometimes it's hard to say it, but I chose that, right?
Yes. Can we just spend like 5 minutes on that? I believe, I'm not alone in my belief, but I believe that our spirit is here to express itself.
Yes.
Right? The spirit wants to express itself in the way the spirit can express itself. And so with that being said, it's going to find many ways to have an expression. And so sometimes it's the things that we may judge about, or don't want to like, or things that are difficult, right? Like things come into our lives, like why is this happening to me at this particular point? But there's like a step back. Well, maybe my spirit needed to experience this for some reason, not for this moment, but maybe for the moment ahead or something like that. And so with that, I give myself some ease. I give myself some ease around the things when times get tough. Because I understand that it's part of the expression.
Right. It reminds me that there's something good in everything that happens, but when it's happening to us, it's like the challenge is so big that we don't get it until maybe it's over, and then in retrospect we can say, oh, now I see the good in that. And so I think a good part of spirituality for me is being able to quickly get there, right? Being able to, and I think with practice, because it's all a practice. The more you practice, the more you practice, the more you get it. So spirituality is a practice, right?
Yes.
And
agreed.
We choose all the time. We choose all the time. So I really appreciate that and understand and make that owning that I chose it. I think that's the key part, because we can live outside of ourselves and make everything about something that's happening over here and never ever own our part in it. And I believe in the law of attraction, and it's hard sometimes to say, oh, I'm attracting this, right? Really?
Right. But here's the so but if you're, I believe if you have a willingness to take ownership for it, then you have the willingness to take ownership of the conversation about it. Because as long as if it's someone else and it continues to be someone else, then you don't have say in the conversation. You can't own the power of it.
Yeah. You
So
give the
if
power
I have
away.
yeah, you give the power away. So if I'm willingness to say I chose it, then I can create the conversation around the reason why I chose it
Yes.
for
Absolutely.
myself.
And
I have the
that
power.
is right. That is a great practice of owning your power and not giving it away.
Not giving it away.
Right. Exactly. So I like that practice. And that is so interesting because when I think of spiritual practices and I say, how do we use them in everyday life? Choice is a practice, right? You can make what is something that works for you when you need to be uplifted, or even like now, with everything that's going on right now, I find that I'm really taking all of this really hard right now, right? Harder
Yes.
than I've ever taken it before. And I really had to grieve, right? For being a Black person. And I had to grieve because I had just pushed it away, just pushed it to the side because I was on a mission. I had some things to do. And so I just kept moving forward. And in that, I can look at feeling like privileged in the sense that I was able to get a great education. I was able to do the things and live a certain life. So I was moving forward, and all of a sudden it hits like, oh no, right?
Yeah.
To really sit back and feel it, right? So this time it was a little different. It's always it's been happening all along, but to just get off that wheel of moving and say, wait a minute, what does this feel like?
Yeah, to do a slowdown and sort of reflect. It's been a very difficult time on a number of fronts. We are I think we're being forced to sort of look at ourselves with some honest eyes.
Yeah.
And so now I think we're still looking, but now there's some questions and some answers we need to start looking at. Not saying anything's right or wrong, but start questioning about what do we want our future to be.
Exactly.
Right. Also, now I think now that everyone has experienced a different type of working environment,
right?
What does it look like going back now that you have perspective? Right. Work still got done and people were still in their places. So now what does work and how can I have a really balanced home work life type situation?
Exactly.
So those are a couple of things and then like as far as the racial stuff, it's interesting to be in this time. I'm grateful, but like sad and unsettled, but I'm grateful to be in this time having this kind of conversation, because for me, I know I'm a Black man. I know where I live. I know where I come from. And I live in the conversation that I am a citizen of the world. I like the world is mine. And so so knowing that and being empowered to share my Blackness with the world, and how and who I am and how I am with the world. So I'm grateful to be in a time where people are starting having conversations around Blackness that everybody wasn't having.
Right, exactly. At all. From a whole different perspective now.
A different perspective.
A total different perspective. There's a different awareness in the air now about what's really going on and what's really happening. It's like you can't ignore it anymore. Like it's just been swept under, but now it's like the elephant in the room. You cannot ignore it anymore. And what are we going to do? Some of the changes to me, I'm not judging, but some of it doesn't make sense to me. It's sort of like, okay, let's get to some real things here, right? Let's go to these companies, right? And get some representation on the boards or high up in the levels. Let's really look at what's going on inside of all of these institutions. So there's so many different layers
Yeah,
to it.
if you actually look at the way this country and the world in some ways is structured, you can become quite defeated if you because it's so baked into every big and small piece of it that you can become sort of numb to it. But I look at, and I'm always present to that there is somebody in my ancestry who said keep going. You know, no, there's someone in my ancestry who said keep going because I'm here, right? Because someone, and so I have to own that as being someone's ancestor in the future, or someone's, you know, that I'm like, I gotta keep. I joked one time. I said my ancestors died so I can mess up. So I can play around, so I can try it out and fail and fumble and succeed.
Go back and do it again.
Yeah.
It is interesting because I talk about spiritual practices. So
Yes.
we talk about, okay, so we're during this period, what spiritual practices, right, can work for people. And there are just so many. I meditate, right, which I find really great for me, but that's not for everybody. And I believe that you can create your own personal spiritual toolkit. And what that means for me is out of all the different spiritual practices, what resonates most with you? So you can have your own personal go-to spiritual practices. And I know sometimes we automatically have some. And when I'm going to ask you what they are, you'll think about, you know, kind of like automatically, if you, when I'm walking down the street and if I trip, I'll say, "Oh, thank you, angels," right?
Got you.
You know, so it's a practice to acknowledge that my angels are there looking out, right? And then, because you know, you have the flashback. Oh, if I have really fallen, then I'm like, okay, thank you, angels, right? So, what would you say are some of the spiritual practices that you use?
Good. So I'm thinking as you speaking, I'm thinking there's one, and as one is walking my dog in the morning, which I've been doing for about 10 plus years, but it's been a practice that sometimes I forget it's for her.
Oh.
Right. Sometimes I forget because I'm in my walk. I'm thinking. I'm planning my day. I'm listening to some music I really love. I'm in like a zone, and so that sort of sets my entire day up. And with that being said, my house is always playing music. It's either from like classical piano to meditative music to like it's always full of music because I'm always looking to create a vibe, in like a sort of fun and like not fun but a fun sort of fulfilling vibe in my home. And so that's another spiritual practice I do. What else do I add into my practice? Those are the two things that come to mind specifically. It's having a walk with my dog and then playing music all the time.
All right. I look at those too because I think singing is a great practice, a spiritual practice. For creative arts, I like to pull out my coloring book or do a crossword puzzle. It's very calming, right? I just got a new keyboard, so now I'm
Mm.
gonna learn how to play music, right? And I've always been a singer, so for me, those also work. People you sometimes think it's not just about prayer or meditation.
Yes.
There's so
There's
many
so many things.
options.
As you're as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the like because I moved in. I have a new house that I'm in, right? So
Mm,
also like creating and putting things and fixing and updating the house. Like those
right.
things, staining my steps or something. It allows me to have a creative outlet. Anything like DJing every now and again, where I just feel like I just need to play some music is like a spiritual practice. Or sometimes I still write poems every now and again. I still write verses, like, so those things where I'm looking to express myself. And also every now and again I like to go to the park and be in nature and just walk
Mhm,
around and
mhm,
be in nature and
mhm.
be in spaces like that.
Like mindfulness practice,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I heard you mention your home, and so you're you said you're interested now in interior design, and that came from buying the house. And
So yeah, well, yeah, some I've always had an interest in it, like even before buying a house, like I will watch all of HGTV.
oh, okay.
But but since I have the house, it's been a wonderful question of what is my space,
Mm,
right? It's a wonderful question of identifying and placing things to define what is my space. And I believe it's a question that a lot of people should ask themselves,
mhm,
just sort of as a discovery question. And
mhm.
so what I've been doing is it's creating it. I just put some shelves up in my bedroom. They're like, I stained the wood. I put like, it's been, and now I walk into my bedroom and I feel like I'm transforming to a different place.
Mhm.
And so with interior design, it's really around, it's an art to it. So I'm intrigued around the art of placing things and how that creates a whole story in like a
Mm.
place in your house.
Or energy, right? Because
Yes.
I think about in some rooms, I can move things a certain way and just open up a space of energy. We had this huge dog bed, right? And so we would put it on the bed, right?
Hmm.
And the dog would get in it, but like it just threw the energy off, right? And so one day I was just like, I put it in another room and the room just opened up as if like I moved furniture around, right? But it's
It's quite
about the
phenomenal.
energy. Yeah, the energy in the room with the different things that you have
Hmm.
inside of the room. And that also supports spiritual practices because I like for my energy to flow, right?
Yes. And
So
yeah.
yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh,
Mhm.
and I'm a practicing. Working hard at it. I'm a practicing minimalist.
Oh,
So it's figuring out that piece too. Like, how do I bring to a
mm,
space all that what's wanted and needed and not anything else?
I call mine organized clutter, right? I mean, it's organized, right?
Understood. Hmm.
But it can be a lot sometimes, right? So
Hmm.
it's interesting as we talk and I think about like spiritual practice and spirituality, many things come to mind, just like we were saying about energy and how energy flows, right?
Yeah.
It's also a part of, creating a spiritual space for
Yes.
yourself. And
Yes.
I think that it's very different now when we talk about religion versus spirituality. Did you grow up in the church as we all did, and then made a how'd that go
There,
for you? Like I said,
um,
we all did.
right. When I was younger, like
Mhm.
young, my grandmother was in the church, but I believed at some point her her working hours didn't work. She worked on Sundays,
Oh,
so that sort of gave church a little waiver. Like I would go sometimes and didn't. And then when I got old enough to decide I didn't want to go to church, I just stopped going to church.
mhm.
I still go every now and again with my grandmother to sort of just be with her, but I, I didn't grow up in it. But when
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
younger, I was definitely part of the church when she was. But then
Mhm.
when her schedule started changing,
You
and
changed
and, and,
with it,
and, and we had and we had choice, I was like, okay, great.
no, thank you for church, right? No, we had to go. So it was just like you knew. And I can even remember in high school, if you wanted to hang out on a Saturday, you had to go to church on a Sunday. So you couldn't go out Saturday and say, I'm sleepy on Sunday
Yeah,
because you would not go out on Saturday. So church was just like an interview. You did it just automatically every Sunday. You went to church and you knew you would go to church, right?
got you.
And I knew then I would just be quiet because I had a lot of questions and it was like, don't question it. So I just sang in the choir and kept it moving, right? And then after I left home, it kind of just dropped by the wayside going. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the practices are still some of the practices I know, but I think as I got older, I really start to understand a little better. And then when I went to seminary, I studied all religions. So in studying
Right.
all religions, it brings perspective, I think. It totally brings
It has to bring,
perspective.
right? It
Yes.
has to be. Yeah.
Yeah, to Christianity, Judaism, all of them. And I learned that it's all the same. Everybody is looking for the same thing. It's just that in each religion, there are just different ways, different everything.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom text, right? The whole thing. So that was what happened for me in learning about all the other ones. And I studied Christianity from a New Thought perspective. Once I was like 30, I started to move more into the unity and the New Thought
Got you.
perspective because it worked better, for me in my life than to follow like the strict Christian doctrines and you have to do this and you have to do that, which I didn't quite understand anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked better for me. But then now I get it. It's so interesting to be able to now say, oh, I understand that. And that's just come over time.
Right.
So I have a different perspective about Christianity than what I had growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
now I get to appreciate all religions. I don't necessarily go to church all the time. I go to church to sing in the choir. Right? So if I can remember when I used to skip around to different churches so that I could sing in the choir because nobody was saying anything that interested me. Like this, but the choirs were singing good music and I love to sing. So I can remember my daughter was like, I'm not switching churches with you again.
That's funny. Oh, that's funny.
And
Oh,
I
that's
was
funny.
like, I would go to 3 churches at one point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, music, and singing, and I love gospel music, right? I love to
Mm-hmm.
sing gospel music too. So those are all a part of some of the things that I have in my spiritual toolkit, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
That work for me, right? So let's talk about the when you are creating, let's say, right?
Okay.
And what's the process for you when you're doing that, right? It's like, right. I guess what I'm getting to is I'm trying to look at, you know how we talked to you about using creative arts as a spiritual tool, right?
Yes.
And so I'm trying to get to how that works and to support others that may be creatives in understanding that using their
Mm,
creativity also can be seen as a spiritual tool. So, I mean,
gotcha.
you know, and yeah, that's how I was kind of getting to with,
So
go ahead.
with yeah, with that for me, um, there's a oh gosh, there's a some layers, right?
Go ahead.
At first, when in the creative process, um, I in the creative process, you are bringing something from nothing into something, right? You're bringing a nothing into something, and it's an idea at first that you bring it into fruition and have it tangible. Like for you with the radio show, right? It wasn't nothing happened. You said you had a thought, hey, I want to create a radio show. You brought the radio show forward, and here we are today,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a creative sort of synergy around that that specific request that you have with whoever you're, the higher power, the higher source, God, the hope, like whoever it is too, there's a request that happens. So there's a conversation.
Mhm.
And so the spiritual practice is having that conversation for me. It's like if I'm putting together a program, I literally have the conversation, the program out loud. Like I'd say, well, this is what I want people to sort of experience. This is how I want like the first day, and I walk through the first day of how they come in, they do this, we do that together. This is how we feel, right? And I'm having the dialogue because I know that I'm not creating it alone. I'm creating with
Mhm.
one with the higher person. I'm making the request. So
Mhm.
that's like in every thing I've created, using everything I've created as it started out as a conversation
Mhm.
between me and my higher source, requesting for the for me to be the vessel to have it expressed in the world. That makes sense. And so it starts with a dialogue. Did that did that did that answer your question?
To the extent that the process you use as a creative, and for you, the dialogue is a part of how you start to get to creating what you're going to create, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I understand that, and as I think about it, we are all creative in many ways, right? We all have creativity, right?
Yes.
And in the beginning, you talked about it. It could be expressed in many ways. I'm a comedian, and I worked in the bank. I could be creative in the bank, just as creative in the bank as I can on the stage as a comedian. So
Right.
creativity can play.
And everywhere. I think the single difference, I
Mhm.
believe, is that in a creative actively um, work that muscle. A creative actively creates.
Mhm.
Whether someone other people may just they're still creating, but they're not in the generation of it. They're just sort of walking through it blindly. I think as creatives, you are actively working that
Always.
muscle in that practice of creating something new.
Always
Yeah.
creating, right? When we talk, I also work at a school, right? And when I think about, so when I was first ordained, I went to be ordained as an interfaith minister because I wanted to study all religions. I had no idea what Reverend Grenetta Mason, Reverend G would be to as, as an interfaith minister. And I am, it's evolving. It's just it's evolving. And I'm finding that I work in a school, and at work, you know, it's about the law of attraction. I seem to attract all the people that need to be uplifted, right? They come to my office and they cry, and I have a word for them. So I start to think of that as my ministry, being able to support people when they're at their lowest point, right? And just give them a bit of hope. Just give them something, you know, to look forward to, right? And I think for us, that's how spirituality can support, right? When I mean, when you're at a point where you're like, I don't know anymore, right? Then where's the hope? What's next? What can you use to support you to just keep going and get up and do it again, right? So I found that, you know, it has manifested in that way through working at the school with the students. And I work in adult education, so it really supports them. So for me, as Reverend G, it just happens in everything that I do, right? My whole, and people think that I'm a minister and I'm going to be speaking the word at church and everything. Not me, right? Not that kind of minister, right? I'm just a regular. Yeah. And I
you have your variations.
Yes, exactly. And I love that, you know, there aren't the restrictions around who I get to be to express as Reverend G. Look, I rhyme, right? There are no like a real heavy parameters around that. It could be like open, right? To one of the things that I know we're gonna close soon, but I wanted to touch on the law of attraction because that's very important to me. And I'd like to get your perspective on the law of attraction. And it's one of the things that I'd like to share a lot more about and have people understand that it's your life, right? You are creating it. So what are your thoughts on the law of attraction?
My first thought was I love it. It works. I've practiced it. I've used it. It's how the law of attraction is how I got my house. It's how I've gotten the careers I've wanted. It's how I've gotten here. And so it's work. It works, and it's a practice. It's a law that you practice, and it's worked so much that I can't be deterred about it.
Right, exactly. Right.
I can explain like with the house particularly. Oh, my car too, but with my house, I used my steps. I wrote down what I wanted. I wrote down how much I wanted to pay for it. I wrote down like the things I want. And then I said, okay, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to receive it. Days later, looked online, saw this place, worked in the price range, came down here, because this was the only place I actually saw. It didn't look like this when I saw it.
Mhm.
It was the only place I saw. Looked at it around and said, "Yeah, this is what I want."
Wow. It's sort of like writing it down, you know, like make the list and be specific because you said how much price, you have to be specific, right?
The street, like I did the street, I did the zip code, I did the street type, because in Philly they have streets that are very narrow. I didn't want to be in a narrow street. I wanted like some breadth. So is that like the house type? I didn't want a whole bunch of steps.
Right. Right.
I got down to the nitty gritty, and
That's it.
and then the thing at the end, I was like, okay, I'm ready to receive it.
That is it. Open, available, and ready to receive. And that's what I think a lot of times we stop ourselves from getting what we want with the thoughts that we keep. Because, you know, my whole thing, set an intention and it will happen. Just get out of the way. And it doesn't mean that there's nothing for you to do, but you will be inspired to take certain actions. So like with the house, you specifically knew exactly what you wanted. You didn't have to see 50 houses because it came to you. You set the intention and you were very specific about it too, which is also important. Because sometimes we'll say we want it and it doesn't come the way we expected it to.
Yeah, it's like people, I want to be in a relationship, and then you get one, and then be upset that you wasn't as clear as you wanted to be.
Right, exactly. Because you didn't you weren't specific enough about what you wanted in the relationship.
And who you wanted to relate to.
Yeah, exactly, right? And also, it's like, what thoughts are you keeping, right? The thoughts that you keep. I always say your life is a direct reflection of the thoughts that you keep, right?
It is. It is.
So I'm all about joy and positive. So I'm continuously trying to keep positive thoughts. Although during this COVID, I've been over on the edge. Right. I was like,
understandably so. Understandably so. Yes.
I'm on the edge, but mostly, you know, I can stay positive and I can find ways to keep myself up. But during this time, it's been a real practice because everything is so different, being in the house the whole time, you know. So I can say during this time, spiritual practices have really supported me in not tipping, you know, that thin line. You know, there's a thin line between love and hate.
Yes.
And between sane and insane. And we all walk in here and either one of us can flip over to insane. But we have these spiritual practices that I use my spiritual practices to help me stay grounded.
Right.
To pick me up, right, and keep moving forward. So I'm always about leveling up and what's next. And that's what I love about you. I like being in the Momentum community because it's always about what's next, leveling up, living your best life. And also it's about, you know, getting to know who you are. When you really can get to know who you are, you make different decisions, you move differently in your whole life.
Yeah, and for me, getting to know who you are is getting to know you are a question. You are not finite. You are not this one particular thing. And I think if you give yourself breath to understand that what I am is a question that needs to be discovered right, then I get to access the full breadth of who I am, rather than me specific. Like there was a me that I had that would not have allowed me to travel. Does that make sense? Because I had a certain idea of who I was, and then I was like this. I'm like, you ain't putting me on that plane until I question myself. What does that mean? Let me get on the plane and experience it first, and then and then say who you are. And so it's a constant questioning of who we are, I think, that we should still be in, rather than treating ourselves as finite things.
Exactly, because we're always changing too, and different things are happening for me now, and I'm reacting in the way I'm reacting to them now. So it's like always about, for me, in this present moment, what's going on right now, presently. And I might react differently now than I would have then, and maybe even differently future, right?
With that being said, that's another practice that I have about spirituality, is practicing being present.
Yeah, good one. I was going to say, now, what are your 3 tips, and what are your 3 top spiritual tools? And boom.
Oh, yeah. Boom. You always have choice.
Love it.
Surrender.
Wow, yeah.
Surrender to what is, and practice being present.
Love those. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for having conversation with Reverend G.
Well, thank you, Reverend G, for having me. Like I said, I'm honored to be here. I'm grateful to see your glow up, and seeing you be you, and sharing yourself with the world in this way.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this week's conversations with Reverend G. And I'm doing these calls so that I can support you in helping you build your own personal spiritual toolkit. So when we go through these different practices in the spiritual toolkit, I hope some of them resonate with you and you practice some of them. So I'm here every Monday to guide you through finding joy and living your best life with grace and ease. Tonight, I want to just leave you with a mindful moment, and a mindful moment can support you in getting present, right? And getting present and trying to find clarity so for your next move. So a mindful moment can be taking a breath so that you can regenerate, recalibrate, and go out there and tackle the world. What I've created for myself, I call it a joy break, right? And so what a joy break is, just take a few moments to find something that brings you joy or that brings a smile to your face. And I guarantee you, when you take a joy break, when you come out of the joy break, you'll be in a more positive frame of mind and you can move forward. So if you're excited about what you've heard, follow me on Instagram at Rev Granetta, on Facebook, Reverend Granetta Briggs Mason, and on YouTube, it's Reverend Granetta Briggs Mason. Have a great evening, and I'll see you guys next Monday on Conversations with Reverend G.
Don't wake me, I'm dreaming. Don't wake me, I'm dreaming.